The hum of the cabin lights was soft, almost gentle, a lullaby in the air. Rain tapped on the fuselage, whispering of storms outside. At Gate 17, just before boarding, staff had called the final group. It was late, nearly 10 p.m., and the terminal was quiet, save for the occasional click of a rolling suitcase. Major David Turner stepped onto the jet bridge, his posture composed yet careful. Uniform crisp, medals discreet. He carried a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He'd just returned from a humanitarian mission in West Africa, worn, determined, his heart heavy with stories only he could carry. He paused at the galley, waited for stewardess Jenna to check his boarding pass, then walked past the first class and business cabins towards seat 14B in economy. The cabin was dim. Most travelers, bleary-eyed, had collapsed in sleep. But at row 14, a woman stirred. She'd been tangled in a blanket when the flight attendant ushered Major Turner to the seat beside hers. 14A. As he passed, their eyes met. She was in her mid-40s, dressed perfectly, waves of dark hair framing a pale face that creased into the stage as Major Turner sank into 14B. Her lips pursed. For a heartbeat, the air between them pulsed with something icy. And then she spoke. "Excuse me," she said, not politely as he expected. "Are you military?" He smiled, courteous but wary. "Yes, ma'am. United States Army Reserve." Her face shifted, thinly veiled unease. "Well, I'm just not comfortable sitting next to someone like you. Can you move?" The cabin lights flickered as though an echo of her tension. Major Turner's heart skipped. The entire row holstered into silence. Passengers stared, awkward, uncertain. He swallowed. "I see." The flight attendant materialized, anxious. "Is everything okay?" "She wants me to move," Major Turner said softly. The woman shook her head, voice brittle. "I won't ride next to a black man. I'm just not comfortable." A hush fell. The thunder outside rumbled, as though sensing the cruelty in the air. Major Turner's throat felt tight. His uniform, the symbol of service, sacrifice, felt like armor, yet momentarily hollow. He'd fought for freedom she likely hadn't even considered tangibly, freedoms of dignity and respect. And here, thrust into the harsh glare of small-mindedness, he felt that dignity teeter. The attendant cleared her throat. "Ma'am, may I offer you a different seat? We can find you somewhere else, or you may switch." The woman glared at Turner, then at the attendant. Her voice wavered, defensiveness cracking. "No, I'm not moving." "He should." Gasps met her words. A few passengers turned, disbelieving. A young mother clutched her child. Two businessmen exchanged uneasy glances. Even the flight attendant looked torn. Major Turner exhaled, calm but feral. "I'm in the uniform of the United States Army," he said, his voice measured. "That means I fought for this country. I believe in equal rights. That includes me." The woman sneered. "Not for people like you." Another rumble of thunder sounded, loud in that narrow, pressurized space. Flight attendant hovered, uncertain. The pilot's voice crackled over the PA as Jenna stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a seating issue, we need to make an adjustment before departure." Her calmness contrasted sharply with the tension. Passengers leaned in, suspicious. The storm rattled overhead. The woman sprang. "This is ridiculous." A hush in the aisle. The man ahead turned. A teenager blinked, confused. The flight attendant placed a questioning hand on her earpiece. Suddenly, the pilot's voice came again, measured, firm. "This is your captain speaking. Everybody, please stay calm. We will resolve this momentarily." Major Turner exhaled, bracing himself. The attendant leaned close. "Sir, would you like to move?" Major Turner shook his head. "No, I can sit here." Jenna glanced to the aisle. "Ma'am, I'm going to suggest you move to 14E or let us seat the man there." The woman shot her a look as though the attendant was a traitor. "Fine." Her words came out clipped. Humiliated though she might be, her pride blocked apology. A flight attendant found her a new seat. The woman stomped down the aisle, face red. Turn glared ahead, bags in tow. Rain drums kept tempo. She passed other passengers, indignant. flicked past crying baby, buzzing phone. Major Turner watched, his chest heavy, pulse thundering louder than the engines priming around them. Once she settled far away from him, Turner's breathing slowed. He touched his name tag, Turner. His thoughts swirled. In that moment, the world seemed to shrink. It narrowed to a seat, a uniform, a refusal. The force of prejudice crackled sharper than the tarmac lighting outside. And yet, through the silence, something bigger began to stir. He inhaled. Around him, others reclaimed their calm, turning back to screens, magazines. One elderly woman leaned over. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. Outside, rain blurred the window, dull gray, relentless. A child cried. The engine sputtered, bright against dark portholes. The pilot's voice returned, disturbingly calm over the cabin's murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain again. Before we take off, I want to express something." A hush followed. The flight attendant stiffened. "If someone's heart could be clouded by ignorance," the pilot continued, voice slow, intentional, "then the only way to clear that cloud is by the light of truth. I want to say this plainly. No one should ever be judged by the color of their skin. And here, on this plane, every single person has a right to respect." A beat. The cabin held its breath. He went on, "We're united through the skies, through service, through humanity. So, I ask each of you, if you feel the judgment, please let understanding guide you instead. We take off now. But I wanted you to know, if anyone tries to demean a fellow passenger, they will be met with more than quiet rebuke. Our crew is ready to stand for what's right." He cleared throat. Cabin crew, secure for departure. Engines roared. Rain lashed windows, the ground slipping away beneath them. Major Turner's eyes misted. Around him, the cabin buzzed, not with uproar, but with something subtle, recognition. A few heads bowed, a couple of eyes shimmered. The woman in her new seat stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. A teenage girl near her watched the announcement, surprised, thoughtful. Major Turner exhaled. His heart pounded, but less from fear and more from something like vindication. Yet he knew this wasn't over. Respect, like flight, must be earned, sustained. As the plane climbed through the storm, the world outside unleashed its fury. Wind, rain, thunder. But inside, something else began to rise. Conscience, awareness, possibility. Up ahead, the pilot navigated the currents, steady hands at the yoke. So, too, Major Turner sat firm in his seat, witness to a small but vital moral turn. The seatbelt sign blinked off. The woman exhaled, curled into her seat. Major Turner looked out the window, stars buried by rain, and wondered what would happen when we landed. How many hearts were changed? How many minds opened? Silence held pregnant. The plane cut through the night like a silver arrow, its wings trembling against the storm's steady howl. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit, hushed but restless. Major David Turner leaned his head against the window. Tiny droplets streaked across the glass, illuminated briefly by the wing lights. He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the pain. His mind wandered, images flashing unbidden. His unit, sandstorms. The little girl and Molly clutching the bottle of clean water he'd handed her. The soldier they'd buried 2 weeks ago. He blinked hard, pulling himself back to the quiet hum of the cabin. Across the aisle, a young boy stared at him, wide-eyed. No older than 7, his cheeks freckled, hands clutching a toy plane. When their eyes met, the boy smiled shyly and whispered his mother. Major Turner gave a small nod in return, but the weight lingered. At the front of the plane, the woman, her, shifted in her new seat. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest, her chin tilted defiantly as though shielding herself from the subtle stares of passengers who had overheard her words earlier. She didn't speak, not to anyone. The intercom clicked softly, and the captain's voice returned, this time warmer. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're passing through some minor turbulence. Please keep your seatbelts fastened. And again, thank you for your patience earlier. Respect is what keeps us steady, even in rough air." Rough air. The plane jolted slightly. A ripple of unease traveled through the passengers. The storm wasn't done with them. David tightened his grip on the armrest, not because of the turbulence, he'd been in far worse, but because of the uneasy quiet settling like fog. He could feel the woman's eyes boring into his back even from rows away. Sometimes, silence carries more weight than words, and in that silence, truths simmer, some too sharp to face. Others, waiting for the right moment to break free. The turbulence worsened. The cabin lights flickered as the plane dipped slightly, then steadied again. Gasps echoed softly. Flight attendants clutched the edges of the overhead bins, their smiles tight but rehearsed. A chime sounded. The seatbelt light blinked back on. The boy across the aisle whimpered softly, clutching his mother's arm. His toy plane slipped from his hands and skittered down the aisle, stopping near David's boots. He bent down, picked it up, and handed it back with a small smile. "Here you go, buddy." The boy's eyes widened. "Thank you, sir." Something in his voice, soft awe, innocent admiration, sent a ripple through David's chest. He gave a quiet nod. From 2 rows back, a man in a gray business suit leaned forward, speaking just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Sir," the man said, voice steady, "for what it's worth, thank you for your service. We appreciate you." David hesitated, then nodded again, quietly. "Thank you." One by one, others began to murmur subtle acknowledgments. Nothing loud, nothing forced. Just quiet threads of gratitude weaving through the tension in the cabin. But not everyone shared the sentiment. The woman in the front row stiffened. She turned sharply, her voice slicing through the cabin. "Are you all serious? Praising him? You don't even know him." Her words were sharp, almost frantic. The young mother across the aisle shielded her child instinctively. The businessman narrowed his eyes but said nothing. David closed his eyes briefly. He'd faced worse, on battlefields and in briefing rooms, but this was different. This was raw, unfiltered prejudice in its purest form. Before he could respond, the captain's voice returned, sharper this time. "Ma'am, this is your captain speaking. I'm going to ask you once to lower your voice and treat everyone here with respect. This aircraft is under my command, and I will not tolerate hostility or hate on my flight." The silence that followed was deafening. The woman turned away, face flushed crimson, but she said nothing more. The turbulence eased. For a brief moment, it felt as though the plane itself was exhaling. David sat back, his muscles taut, but his expression calm. He wasn't angry, just tired of carrying the weight of battles fought abroad and battles still being fought at home. And yet, beneath that exhaustion, something unexpected stirred. Hope. The young boy, braver now, leaned over again. "My dad says heroes wear uniforms. You're a hero, right?" David hesitated. His throat tightened. "I'm just someone who serves," he said quietly. The boy tilted his head, unsatisfied with that answer, but too shy to press. The engines roared louder as the plane climbed higher, finding smoother air. Conversations quieted, the cabin dimming further as passengers drifted toward uneasy sleep. But David stayed awake, his gaze fixed on the dark clouds outside. He could feel it. This story wasn't over. Something was building. And then, a chime rang. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've been informed of an unexpected situation, and we may need to divert. Please remain calm." Gasps fluttered through the cabin. The plane trembled again, subtle but enough to draw whispers and darting glances. David straightened in his seat, every instinct sharpened. The woman at the front clutched the armrests, panic flashing across her face. She looked back toward him for just a moment, fear replacing defiance, and then quickly turned away. In that instant, the cabin shifted. Fear doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about color, about prejudice, about pride. It finds everyone equally. The pilot's voice returned, calmer now but firm. "We'll explain more when we have confirmation. For now, keep your belts fastened. We have everything under control." The hum of the engines deepened, and the plane tilted slightly. Passengers murmured, restless. David's jaw tightened. Something in the captain's tone wasn't right. The storm outside raged on, lightning slicing through the darkness. And then, suddenly, everything went silent. The hum of the engines, the chatter of the passengers, even the storm itself. Just silence. The silence was suffocating. Major David Turner sat rigid in his seat, eyes scanning the cabin, as if reading the fear written across every passenger's face. The turbulence had stopped, but the quiet felt worse, unnatural, like the pause before something snaps. Then, the captain's voice returned. Calm, steady, but serious. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've received a report of a technical issue with our right engine. We have it under control, but as a precaution, we're preparing for an emergency landing. Please stay calm and follow crew instructions. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. The young boy across the aisle whimpered and clutched his mother. The businessman gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. Even the woman, the same woman who had demanded that David be moved, froze in her seat, trembling as she whispered frantic prayers under her breath. David took a deep breath. He'd faced danger before, but this was different. He wasn't on a battlefield this time. He was trapped in the same fragile metal tube as everyone else, completely dependent on the crew up front. Still, instinct took over. He unbuckled just enough to turn to the people around him. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who'd been through chaos and survived it. Listen, he said, locking eyes with the nervous passengers nearby. This plane is designed for situations like this. The pilots are trained for it. We're going to be okay. Just stay calm and follow directions. A few people nodded. Others clung to his words like they were a lifeline. The little boy peeked over the seat, his voice trembling. Are we going to crash? David met the boy's wide, tearful eyes. No, buddy, he said softly. We're going to land. And when we do, you're going to tell me all about that toy plane of yours, okay? The boy sniffled but nodded, holding on to his mother tighter. The plane jolted suddenly, dipping just enough to draw screams from the back. The overhead bins rattled, and a bag tumbled into the aisle. Flight attendants hurried to reassure passengers, their faces pale but composed. Through it all, David stayed still, calm, a quiet pillar of strength. The intercom clicked again. Prepare for landing, the captain said, voice calm but urgent. Flight attendants secure the cabin. The plane descended rapidly, engines roaring, the ground far below coming into sharper focus through streaks of rain. The runway lights glimmered like distant candles in the storm. David closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, steadying himself, not for his sake, but for everyone watching him. Minutes later, the wheels slammed against the tarmac with a deafening screech. The plane shuddered violently, but the pilot kept control, slowing them until the terrifying roar faded into a steady hum. And then silence again. But this time, it was the kind of silence that comes with relief. A wave of cheers, sobs, and applause erupted through the cabin. People hugged each other, some crying openly. The little boy clapped his small hands, beaming up at David with innocent relief. The flight attendants moved quickly, ensuring everyone was safe, while the captain's voice came back, this time lighter. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to solid ground. Thank you for staying calm. And thank you to those who reminded us all what real courage looks like tonight. The words lingered in the cabin, heavy with meaning. The woman, the one who'd refused to sit next to him, slowly rose from her seat, trembling. She hesitated, her pride visibly warring with something deeper. And then, quietly, she walked toward David. Her voice shook as she spoke. She swallowed hard. I was wrong. About you. About everything. The cabin hushed again, every ear tuned to her. David met her gaze, his own calm. Steady. You were afraid, he said softly. Sometimes fear makes people see the wrong things. What matters is what you see now. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you for being who you are, for staying calm when the rest of us couldn't. David gave a small nod. We all made it through. Together. The boy across the aisle tugged his sleeve. You are a hero, he said shyly, clutching his toy plane. For the first time that night, David smiled a real, unguarded smile. As passengers began to disembark, The captain stepped out of the cockpit, his uniform pristine despite the chaos of the last hour. He shook David's hand firmly. "Major Turner," he said, voice full of respect. "I didn't know who you were when you boarded, but I do now. You reminded everyone here tonight what strength really looks like." David shook his head humbly. "I just did what anyone should do. Stayed calm. That's all." But the captain smiled knowingly. Sometimes, calm is the greatest courage of all. Outside, rain still drizzled softly on the tarmac, but the storm had passed. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, lights flashing in the distance, but no one cared. They were safe. As David walked to the jet bridge, passengers whispered their quiet thanks. Some shook his hand. Some just nodded. Even the woman, still teary-eyed, whispered a soft thank you as she passed. He stepped into the terminal, the world beyond the storm opening up before him. He exhaled slowly, a deep, grounding breath. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something unfamiliar. Not the weight of battles fought, not the heaviness of prejudice endured, but something lighter. Hope. Sometimes, storms remind us of the truth, that no matter how different we think we are, we're all the same when the world tilts beneath us. Fear strips us down to our bare humanity. But courage, quiet, steady courage, reminds us how to rise. And that night, at 30,000 feet, a cabin full of strangers learned what it means to see beyond fear and to choose respect instead. As David walked toward the exit doors of the terminal, the little boy ran up to him, clutching the toy plane. "Here," the boy said breathlessly. "You can have it. So you don't forget." David knelt down, eyes soft. "I won't forget," he said, "but you keep it. And remember, bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about standing tall, even when you are." The boy smiled, clutching his plane tight, and ran back to his mother. David watched them leave, then adjusted the strap of his duffel bag and stepped into the cool night air. The storm was gone. The sky was clear. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like tomorrow might be, too.